questions. Yeah? I'll try and get in the shot with you. Right. Some of you just mind.
You want me looking at the camera or looking at you when you ask the questions?
Look at me, both of us can get in, right? Right, we'll start off at I am Pat.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ken Jones. Nice to meet you, mate.
Yeah. Ken, I've got some questions for you. Yeah, if you'd like to answer these.
No problem.
Okay. So we'll start with one. The British SF selection process hasn't changed pretty much for the last few years now.
Okay, well...
What makes it so effective?
Well, the selection system, well, first of all, I'd like to differentiate between SF selection and SAS and SBS selection. They're very different things.
First clean fatigue at Fan Summit, mate.
Okay, fantastic.
28 minutes. Is that possible?
No, that's wrong. That's impossible.
28 minutes to the top of the fan.
Sorry, mate. Sorry about that. Do you want to start again, or shall I just continue answering? You can edit. Yeah, I'd like to differentiate between the SF selection course and the SAS and SBS. There's a profound difference between the two. The special forces have got they've got the reserves and various attached units like 264 Signal Squadron and the reserve counterparts 263, and they march for 1 week at 3 k's an hour, whereas the SAS and SBS they have 4 weeks at 4 kilometres an hour. Bearing heavier loads as well, so they're markedly different in intensity and duration. As for selection itself, the model that Major Woodhouse conceived of post-World War II is more or less still in effect today. It's very simple, primeval, and some might say brutal. It's just man bearing a heavy load in a rucksack, no gimmicks, no tricks, bearing a heavy load over arduous mountain terrain, solo efforts, self-sustained, and navigating between RV points. The selection process has barely changed. Marches, routes have been modified slowly, but the location, everything, they hit the perfect model first time round. It's been tweaked here and there, but it's still more or less in the original format, which is very rare in this modern age. I mean, selectionists refuse to step into the modern world, and they've come up with a perfect model.
All right. Which stage of the selection was the most difficult for you in your life?
Personally, for me, the most demanding phase was the jungle. Exercise hat-up hurdle is just some people take to the jungle better than others, and I had a difficult time there. It's extremely demanding terrain. The physical exercises, the bearing heavy loads, just as you were on the hills in the Brecon Beacons, but with the humidity and the heat, and having to I mean, you don't encounter much wildlife. I mean, we move pretty stealthily, and the animal, any snakes, any little beasts, it's a very rare encounter you see of them. They tend to be shy away. So it's normally the mosquitoes. We have, can be a pain in the ass. And one particular day, immediate action day is widely regarded as the single hardest day in the 6-month selection course. It's just a full day of live firing immediate action drills with a casualty simulation at the end. And I actually chopped my finger, nearly lost my finger on immediate action day. I was flown out and had to have it sewn back together. It was a horrendous day, extremely demanding. Never known anything like it. The hills, for me personally, paled into insignificance compared to that day.
Last summer, 3 candidates lost their lives during selection to the TA SAS. I'm sure others were saved only by quick rescue reaction. How do you think and what could have went wrong?
I mean, it's a difficult question to ask, and obviously it's politically sensitive, but there's a multitude of things that could have gone wrong. I mean, we have to break it down to the bare bones of the situation. We're talking about initially, we're talking about the most demanding physical selection aptitude phase, arguably in the entire world. So it's going to be hard. The casualties are very few, considering the demand. And more kids die eating boiled sweets each year or on trampoline accidents. So let's put things in perspective. I think the issue is that 3 died in one day, and it's sad losses. I mean, no doubt the extreme heat conditions did play a significant part, but it's very hard to pinpoint what went wrong beyond that, because the courses, the particular march I believe they were undertaking, as of all the marches, they're split down into RV points, and these soldiers, these volunteers, would have had to have passed through an RV point manned by the directing staff. It would have been more than a simple matter of logging the number. These guys would have had to have proved that they were capable, switched on. They would have to have given a they'd have to said their name, pinpointed their current location, read out a 6-figure grid reference, identified by pointing to it on a map, presented to the DS. He would then issue another 6-figure grid reference. They'd have to identify it, point on the map where it is, and meanwhile, if the DS was unsure that they were fit to continue, or they weren't physically capable of making to the next checkpoint, he would have pulled them. So these guys, and the DS aren't shy of pulling people by any means. So these guys have obviously satisfied the criteria, and then within a very short time, possibly from not managing their own water supplies, or maybe underestimating how much water they'd require, or believing they could resupply somewhere further up the mountain. Something's gone wrong. The heat, heat exhaustion, heat stroke more likely, dehydration, and it's tragic. I don't have the.
You don't like to talk about it.
It's difficult to talk about, and it's without being insensitive. And I'm not fully armed with all the information to give a fully accurate answer. Or as I can, you can put bits of a jigsaw together and try and ascertain what's happened between RV points. I've got a good idea of the route selection they took, and from what I gather, it was that slope directly behind you, just there. But they would have hit an RV point at Beacons Reservoir Car Park. The next RV point would have been Fan Summit. Prevented from contouring the road, so it had to have gone back up that slope. If you look how shockingly steep it is, that is a murderous slope. Bearing £55 plus an assault rifle plus food and water, we're talking near £70, which is half of a small man's body weight. And then in that heat, I think it was between 30 and 33 degrees. They'd have been exposed on the open slope. It's a tough one, and it's an uncomfortable one.
Just check make sure it's still on.
Okay.
I don't want him shouting at me. Yep, it's still working. Right. So, before your selection, what kind of unusual equipment do you prefer, and how did it work for you?
Okay, my equipment was quite basic, but I was on top of the basics. I tried to keep it simple, and I just made sure my priority was to get a good basic kit, but to make sure it was as fine-tuned, as comfortable as possible. I'd get on top of everything. I wore a webbing belt, just a webbing belt without the shoulder straps, around my waist, and it would hold one water bottle pouch and another one on the right that was just full of jelly babies and just quick snacks. But just because I knew that it was going to be wet, it was going to be chafing on my hips. My webbing belt, it was the same one I was issued in Power Reg, and I essentially nicked it from the stores and never turned it back in. I made it so sure, it was so supple and soft, and these webbing pouches are so they're very rigid. So it perfect. It fit like a glove. It didn't rub. I'd had it years. I wore it down. All the fabric was soft. The little things like that make such a difference. My Bergen was finely tuned. I always use the same Bergen. I'd finely tuned out to pack it. My balance was perfect. I knew how it needed to fit. On each shoulder was the equilibrium. My boots, I was on top of my boots. So I got really good quality Italian boots. I still have the original boots I passed selection with and trained with from 1999. I still wear them to this day. They're in the shed there. They're fantastic. And I had little systems, like I'd always wear a pair of professional tennis players' socks, because they stick to the feet and they stop your feet getting blisters and sliding around. If you think a tennis player who's always skidding hard to left to right, and those guys don't get blisters, and it's fine for us. And then over the top I'd have a real good mountain pair of socks, and I'd always remove the trainer insoles from the boots, because boot companies don't invest a lot of money in the insoles, but running shoe company's good. So I had a good pair of Asics Kayano gel running shoes. I pull the insole out of that and I put it in my boots. Comfortable boots. As long as you're on top of your feet, you can survive just about anything else. Good basic kit, but well maintained and just comfortable. Any fall can be uncomfortable. I was on top of everything, so I was warm, dry, or cool when necessary, and comfortable at all times. And I stayed on top of my hydration, just doing the basics well. That's all it's about. no need for sophisticated Gucci kit. Do the basics well, be comfortable, and obviously coupled with the correct physical preparation and mental stamina, then you're going to be fine.
It's just like football, I was saying, in boots.
Yeah.
Have you done any special mental preparations?
I mean, I've done no specific mental preparations as such. I guess my background's, I mean, I have the parachute regiment's my mother unit, so I mean, I guess that's all the training prior to that. I've never really been through a psyching up process stuff. My mental preparation is just installed and ingrained in me through just from my own character, my life, and then obviously supplemented by my time as a young paratrooper.
Yeah, because I just read a couple of minutes ago in your book about you're into mountain climbing, you're cycling, and you just keep fit.
I mean, a lot of them have principally been replacements because obviously my military career is over now with after the injuries I sustained. So I did climb beforehand, but cycling has been a good replacement. I still climb a little bit, so I like to keep active. And
is it true that selection is not as hard as continuous training?
I mean, continuation training. I mean, the jungle makes up continuation training as such, and as we've already established, the jungle is incredibly hard for me. Combat survival phases, it's hard to put it in perspective how hard it actually is, because the hills phase and the jungle phase that come before it are so extremely demanding, it kind of makes it look easy, even though it's very hard. So I mean, it depends. There was guys who thrived in the jungle who had a nightmare and survived the hills by the skin of their teeth. So it's very much horses for courses. It's an odd one. So,
what would your advice be for a young lad who already made the decision to join the SF?
I mean, anyone wants to join a Special Forces unit or the SAS, I mean, ideally you should get some military background, either join the TA or the Royal Marine Reserve or a reservist unit, or sign up to the regulars. Ideally, I mean, any unit would do. Just get some good hard soldering experience, at least 3 years, maybe probably 5 years. I know now they've got more of a demand for operational experience, whereas when I joined there wasn't such a requirement, because there wasn't no operations for conventional units to go on. But do some hard service, or even join as a reserve. I know the RMR have a very good success rate on selection, and it's a very good unit to join. So you don't need to join the regulars. You just need to train extremely hard and be.
When you were a kid, did you like the scouts, anything like that?
I was a scout before I joined. I really liked the scout, just for general mischief, really, and just being outdoors and
for camping.
Just things like that. I just got mischief and adventure in my blood, and it just kind of progressed from there to joining the army. It was a natural progression for me.
What made you choose to become a soldier?
Part disastrous A-level results, and secondly. There'd always been a burning ambition to join the army from a young boy. I'd always kind of had it in mind, and then the idea kind of died, and then I got to 17, 18 again, and I thought about joining the army, and it was always in the mind that I had to be more a paratrooper.
Did you do any jobs before you joined the army?
No, I didn't. I was at college. I never worked. I bottled some water in a factory in my hometown of Church Stretton, Wells Water. There was a water bottle on the conveyor belt. I didn't last too long there. I knew I wanted to even though it was a novelty to earn some money. I knew that wasn't for me. Before
you joined the SF, what was your job in the army?
I was a paratrooper. Served with the 1st Battalion Parachute Regiment.
What inspired you to leave your unit and join the SF?
To be honest, at the time I'd had enough of a parachute regiment. There'd been no operations at all.
Nobody inspired you to join the SF?
I was inspired. Well, it was on my first tour of Northern Ireland. I remember meeting some badged guys from the SAS, and we did some exercise. And I noticed there was just a quiet, calm demeanour. There was none of the screaming or shouting or any of the egos that were so prevalent in the parachute regiment. There was a calmness and a discipline, and it was kind of inspiring. They were nice. They find the time of day to speak to you and stuff, and they seemed to be quiet and humble. They're quiet professionals, and that appealed to me. I mean, be honest, my mentality or my personality wasn't really cut out for a parachute regiment. I thought this, you know, it's always for any soldier. You know, I guess it's always kind of an ambition to, you know, to test yourself to the ultimate. It was always known. I was very proud to be a paratrooper, but I knew that there was a test that took it up a next level. P Company was extremely demanding for me. I did struggle a great deal, but I just wanted to go to the next level, and knowing it's there is always compelling to me. I thought, well, you've got to try. And as I said in the parachute regiment, it's every paratrooper's God's given right to a 10th selection. That's not so. I had to give it a shot, and I was inspired by guys who'd gone before me, and those brief encounters I've had with SAS operatives in Northern Ireland, just over a brew in the Nappy, or just in a bar room over a beer watching the football, or a card game playing blackjack with them on exercise.
So you all joined up, all met up, joined together now, yeah?
Yeah, occasionally, yeah, but always be a few of them, especially because there's such a strong parachute regiment contingent in the SAS, so there'd always be someone from Hereford who knew the guys in the paras.
Oh. Yeah. The SF are famous not only because great camaraderie, but also specified sense of humour. Could you say something more about that?
Well, I must say, I can't say this is specific to the SAS or Special Forces as such. Most squaddies, most soldiers, particularly from infantry units, have all got a unique, very dry, special and specific, somewhat grotesque sense of humour. You know, it's a sense of humour that keeps you going in the worst and hardest of conditions. And you know, best way to face hardship and adversity is through laughter. And you know, I think if this applies to all the army and the navy too. Experience with the Marines. So, yeah, this is nothing SAS or SBS specific, but a vital component to a 4-man patrol all the way up to a 10-man section.
This is one of my questions I'd like to hear. You have served in countries that most of us will never visit. What made the most lasting impression on you?
I mean, I think the country that made the strongest impression on me was actually, well, I wouldn't say it's a country, it was Northern Ireland, because it was my first operational deployment. I was a young boy, and you know, I remember getting there on the first day and being told that the Continuity Army Council had issued a warning that there was a bounty out to assassinate a paratrooper. And I was very wide-eyed, and you know, and setting foot out on patrol in the streets of Dungannon, it was just, the senses were enlivened, and you know, you knew the history of the Troubles, even though things had quieted down at the time. I mean, a lot happened there. It was a very demanding tour. I mean, even though there was no shots fired, you know, it was an intense, uncomfortable, difficult, stressful period. The guys were boredom crept in. You know, the guys would get tense. There'd be internal conflicts. There was a lot of aggression around. And a lot of me changed, and I mean, it was so groundbreaking because it was my first operational deployment, and I made so many decisions about my future there. There's a lot of time to think and learn a lot about yourself and make decisions for your future. I was 19 years old, 19, so I wasn't the youngest either, but it was a very tough time. It was there I decided I wanted a 10th selection, and you know, I also decided I didn't want to come back to Northern Ireland again, and ever. I thought it was a total waste of time, a waste of manpower, and it was a lost and a pointless cause. We weren't doing anything worthwhile, and you know, it's just.
Have we still got like SAS now? Are they still out now?
I mean,
it's all quiet now, isn't it?
I mean, it's all quiet. I can't really comment on where everyone is at any particular time and stuff, but there's always teams on standby to go anywhere. And normally people have they've got a few blokes where they need. There's always someone where they need to be. Put it like that. That's the most diplomatic way I can put it.
Cool. How's service in the SS changed your life? How's it service in the SF changed your life? And what have you gained and what have you lost?
Yeah, I mean, joining the SAS was just a massive change for me as a person and as a soldier. It was kind of the soldier I always wanted to be. I don't buy into this concept of the SAS are the best. I just like the way that they do things. I like quiet, more humble. I just it just seems to be more stealthy. and it's like a mode of soldering that suits my personality a bit better. And I liked it, and I changed. I met a lot more educated people who were a lot less of aggressive or a better level of controlled aggression. I met people that influenced me to educate myself there and go to university. On my very first interview with Hereford, I was told not to join LDET and to go to university. And I fucked them off anyway and tried to join, but later on I went to join university. I met a load of guys from RMR who all got badged and passed the regular selection course, and they'd all been to university. I just met a different breed of soldier there, and obviously my soldiering skills become a lot more sharper, and I gained a lot more confidence in my abilities, and a stronger degree of quiet confidence I could carry with me. That anything could be accomplished, and I was more comfortable to do things on my own. I wasn't dependent on orders of someone else. I just become far more accomplished, far more precise in my abilities. I was just become more of an efficient machine, but I've also become more of a thinking soldier as well. I identified the art of soldiering more, whereas very often power it was just a struggle to get from day to day, and you lost interest. You become aware of the art of soldering and the craft involved. So it was very special.
I know, it's just a question of time.
I believe it comes from, I think, the founder, David Stirling.
Yeah.
Okay, it was all the Oxford and Cambridge University boys. They designed the cap badge for wings, and I think it was Stirling himself who conceived the idea.
If you didn't join the army, what would you like to be doing now?
It's very hard to say. I'd like to be doing what I'm doing now, but I may not be been doing it if I'd joined the army.
I mean, like when you're in school, they say what you're going to do when you leave school. I'm going to be a lorry driver.
I thought I was going to be a footballer, and now I don't have much regard for football, to be honest. I don't know. I never really. I was just enjoying life. I never thought, even as a young boy, I wanted to be a soldier. It was kind of there, but I never had my heart set on it. And I was just happy, just enjoying myself playing football, and I just took each day as it comes. And I was quite relaxed. I never had like some steely, determined focus from a young age. I must be a soldier or a policeman or whatever, any job like that. So I just took it as it.
Did you ever play soldiers when you were a kid?
I'd go around shooting things and a toy plastic gun, but. And just breaking things, just causing a bit of damage, and just mischievous little antics that kids get up to that I thought was soldierly tactics at the time, and things like that. But no, I don't know what I'd be doing if I joined the army, to be honest. I don't know. I guess when people say that, maybe they've all been destined to become soldiers, and that's it, and that's the way it is.
Today, Avalanche Events organised Van Dance event. How many fans attend every year? But life goes on. What are your plans for the future?
My plans for future off the back of the Van Dance is to launch a 4-test week series. I'd like to run each of the selection courses 4 weeks long, but it culminates in 6 test week marches. So I'd like to stage all of them, and indeed we've just launched the date for the very first one, point to point, which is going to be announced shortly. So it's going to be the original route, one they've used for a couple of generations now. So this is what I've always been. It's been my burning ambition from the start. Van Dance is the litmus test for these candidates to prove that they're capable of taking this to the next level.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome, mate. You're welcome. Mate, do you want a brew or anything, mate?
Can you just do 2 more things?
First, mate.